Hi out there, community and friends. I'm so excited today. What I wanted to go over and to discuss before we even get started is there are a lot of people who suffer from chronic pain, who suffer from fibromyalgia and its pain. There are conditions out there, cancers, etc. of that nature. There's also individuals who might have conditions such as MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, right? And they all have certain issues and or symptoms that can really plague them. Okay, and so what I'm excited about today, and last year, we're going to be interviewing, it's mentioned Kween right here. She's gay, right? She's a medical cannabis educator. But really the whole thing about today's interview is really trying to weed through and get some answers, because last October, medical marijuana actually became legal in Canada, right? And so for a lot of people, many, I guess you could say traditional, conventional, medical ways of what they were doing, right, are no longer serving them. And so they're looking for options out there. So we want to get some questions answered. What's the process thing? So that's what today's interview is all about. So I'm very, very excited about that. Okay, and I think it's an important topic because as a healthcare professional myself, okay, I get asked this a lot, right, in terms of, you know, what do I do? What can happen? What's going on? Can you help me, right? Yeah. Is this for me, right? So I think today's topic is really, really important. So for those who don't know me, my name is Jay, and I am the owner of H2O Works Canada, where client care is water rehabilitation in a pool setting. You can also go onto my Facebook page, this Facebook page, Jay's What's Up, and you can read all about my credentials, things of that nature. And the Facebook page itself is actually community-based. Okay, I think it's really important that we learn to collaborate more with individuals, showcase, you know, women entrepreneurs, areas of interest, what's going on in the community, so it can help you or help somebody you may know and or love, right? That's what the whole thing. So we're going to go hashtag, collaboration is cool. Okay, so people out there, if you're watching, let us know where you're watching from. You could certainly leave a comment, you know, share, like, etc. Love to hear from you as well, because again, this topic I think is really, really important. So what I'd like to do, thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Right, like so exciting. I want to introduce everyone to you, about you, okay, if that's good. So you have quite an interesting background.
I do.
Yes, you really do, right?
I really do, yeah.
Now you have a dance background, right, and singing background.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah, and was that here in Toronto, Canada?
I did do my musical theatre degree in Toronto, but I actually went to the University of Guelph here in Guelph, Ontario as well, where we're sitting right now.
Alumni.
Yay. Yeah. So I started there for a psych degree, which I think was a little bit of my parents' idea, and like I just wanted to make them happy like everybody else does, and I realized it was definitely not for me, and musical theater was something I really loved. Artistic elements was kind of my way and my outlet for a lot of things, including just some of the things I was going through on an emotional level. So then I ended up in Toronto at the Randolph Academy for Performing Arts, and I graduated valedictorian from that school.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Randolph. And so musical theater was, you know, pretty amazing. I love to sing, I love to dance, but I went in a singer, I came out a dancer, and I think more than anything, I came out a teacher and an educator in any aspect of what I work in. So now I've kind of come off the stage in the last 5 years, and now I've taken a step back, and now I'm doing a little more choreography. So I'm doing Chicago the Musical right now.
She's in that right now, right? She's doing it. Chicago the Musical's coming up 2 weeks. Okay,
yeah, you can come see it at Guelph Little Theater. So I'm doing that, and that's just been like an amazing thing. But then on the other side, there's this whole other world I work with, which is the cannabis world.
That's right.
So,
and you are an educator.
Right. I have been in this industry for a good, I've been using medical marijuana since I was 15, but I've been in the industry heavily working since about 5 to 7 years. Right. Yeah.
And you work in conjunction also too with Lyte Resources in Toronto.
Yeah.
So maybe you could explain what is Lyte Resources?
Absolutely.
For people in Toronto.
So I actually work as a patient educator for Lyte Resources. It is this amazing company. What we are is we're a medical cannabis clinic. So we connect patients with doctors so you can get your medical prescription. The beautiful thing about this is that we have doctors who are Health Canada licensed doctors, but if your doctor isn't necessarily someone in support of it, sometimes it's either, they'd they just don't know and they're not educated. So to prescribe, that doesn't always make sense. So we do have that available. And then on top of that, we have people like myself and Martina, shout out to Martina, who are patient educators. And we spend up to 45 minutes with you, just going over all the logistics surrounding like registration, but also surrounding all the licensed producers, all the products. It's so confusing. And I think you had mentioned one thing was that in October, medical cannabis became legal, and it's actually in October it was recreational cannabis that became legal. So medical's actually been legal for about 10 years.
Thank you.
But it is exactly that. It's so confusing to understand like legalities because a lot of people just didn't know.
That's right. Yeah.
So Lyte Resources is there for those questions and answers as well, on top of helping you through your medical prescription. So it's a really nice resource. It's covered by OHIP. It's free of charge. Your doctor's free. Your educator the whole time is free. The only thing you're paying for is product.
Okay. That's excellent to know. Now, before we get more into that, I want people to know too a bit about your background, because if you notice, she said she started using medical at a young age. So you have, I guess, a background, a medical history background that actually also kind of drove, I don't want to say drive, but actually kind of put you into this advocacy based on your own personal situation. And if you're okay, would you mind sharing a little bit about your history?
Yeah, thank you. I think drive is such a really great word, actually. It kind of did spark my interest in cannabis was my own health. So for a long time, I've suffered with chronic pain. So at 10 years old, I was actually diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which for most people, if you know anything about fibromyalgia, it's a very, very rare age to be diagnosed with something so severe in terms of chronic pain. And as a 10-year-old, that is life-altering. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle my body, right? You're just not an adult and you're just screaming out for help. I'm really lucky because my mom is a medical nurse. So my mom works at within the Guelph Community Health Centers, and she's been a nurse for 44 years. So she was really helpful in navigating through the pharmaceutical world because it was just so complicated all the time. They're throwing this drug at you and this drug at you and try this now and here's this test tomorrow and then another test. And it was just extensive. And then a small detail about me is that I'm adopted. So my medical family history, I have none. I don't have anything. So we're starting from scratch, and it was just this awful experience. So when I figured out I had fibromyalgia, I just went through, I don't think I had much of a livelihood as a kid. Now that I think about it and I look back at 10, that's when things really started to go downhill. And I just wasn't a kid as much anymore. I couldn't do the things I wanted to do. I was crying all the time. Even like sitting at the piano, playing piano hurt my body because it was like too much on my back, just like the smallest things. And that progressed into years of pharmaceuticals. And I had about 12 medications that I was taking that were making me deathly ill. And it was like I was taking medication for medication. There was one that knocked me out too much. And there's nothing against pharma. Again, I think had I been supported with an educator throughout this, it would have been a much easier process as well. But it did lead me to finding cannabis. And around 17, 18, I really started suffering with my gastro system. I have a long history of working in retail, and I didn't take care of my body properly, and I'm paying for it, really. And now I have a symptom called gastroparesis. So it is a slow gastro system. So instead of taking like 2 hours or 3 hours to digest something, it could take me up to 8 hours to a day to digest food. So this can be really difficult, obviously, if you're backed up, all that dirty, gross stuff, right? But nevertheless, I now had all these diagnoses, and I was really, really, really struggling between my eating habits, my sleeping, my pain, my inflammation. But then I also wanted to live a regular life. So medically, I felt really lost and really alone until I found medical cannabis.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
You know what? When people tell their stories, right, they are putting themselves out there.
So I think that's so important.
And so we appreciate it because then other people can relate too, in terms of maybe, you know what, I had that happen as well. So thank you so much. So if we're going to start to dive into the subject, we know that medical cannabis really, there's cannabinoids, and there's really two, and they have CBD and THC. Now, for some people, they may not know what that means.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you help maybe explain just those two right there?
Yeah, definitely. So what we know from the cannabis plant is two main cannabinoids. Now, there are hundreds of cannabinoids that sit within a cannabis plant, but the ones that are so commonly talked about is THC, and then we have our CBD. I'm going to give it plain scope, easy understanding. So you have CBD. The nice thing about CBD is it's non-impairing. So you can still go to work, you can still drive, you can still be with your kids, you can still do your regular day-to-day life. This is what I use when I'm teaching or, you know, when I need relief, but I don't want to be impaired or I don't want to be that high that we know or have heard about when we talk about cannabis, right? So CBD is actually like changing the scope of the medical field because it's not impairing. Whereas THC is what we know and love for the cannabis community, but for some people is maybe not their favorite thing. So THC is actually the active component in cannabis that causes the impairment. Okay. So there is value in that for sure, and we can go dig deeper into that perhaps later. But nevertheless, THC is going to cause that impairing part. So it's great for pain and inflammation. It's great for sleep because it's causing that impairment. So for a lot of people, you're going to feel that heaviness. You're going to want to go to bed. So those are the two biggest differences surrounding those two. That's really the one that you want to understand.
I think this, you know, getting through pain, a reduction of pain, it would be huge. Because when you're talking about symptoms and sleep, our body needs to sleep in order to repair itself. And if it doesn't get the sleep and if it doesn't get that repairment, then you can cause other issues and symptoms within the body. So those two are huge, those things right there. So people who do suffer, as I mentioned before, with chronic pain, with fibro, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, as I said, there's MS, mental illnesses, schizophrenia, right? Post-traumatic syndromes, things like that, okay? So what happens is, and if you can help us out with this, that's perfect, right? We need to go maybe a little deeper into how that happens within the body. So if you're open to maybe talking a bit more about the endocannabinoid system, what happens? Perfect. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah. So it can be really confusing kind of understanding the system. Now, one beautiful thing about the cannabis plant is it works with a system called the endocannabinoid system, the ECS. And that endocannabinoid system actually sits within our own bodies as well, which is so cool that we are sharing a system with plant life. If that doesn't show like the power of our world, I don't know what else does, right? And that being said, cannabis plant might not be the only thing that runs through this. It opens a whole new world for natural healing. That being said, the endocannabinoid system is a system that is running through the body, through your cells, through your receptors. So you actually have two CBD receptors in your brain. So you're actually born with CBD in your body, but they're actually known as CB1 and CB2 receptors. CB1 receptor is running all that like emotional, physiological, your mental state of being. So if you're suffering from anxiety, you're suffering from depression, most of us are, the stresses of everyday to-day life, any of those things that are surrounding like mental health is with their CB1 receptor. Whereas opposed to your CB2 receptor, say that 10 times fast. CB2 receptor, that's my favorite receptor. And the reason for that is it actually runs your immune system and a lot of your organs. So that's super important for people who are suffering from like your fibromyalgia, your arthritis, anything that's autoimmune is really important. So you could have a full autoimmune disease, and a lot of the time it's just that receptor's a little weak or a little broken. And it's just a matter of building that back up. That being said, the endocannabinoid system can differentiate from person to person. That's why the medical cannabis and recreational cannabis, because that's totally fine if you want to do that too, can be so confusing because everyone is completely different. You might have, you know, Jay, you could have a lot of CBD already in your body, and I might have it. I probably do have a ton of THC already in my body. So everyone is different. So what this medication does is it puts you back in control of your own medicine. It gives you a time to reconnect with your body and say, what do I need today? What strain do I need today? What do I need to build those endocannabinoids within the system?
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's excellent. So when we break it back down and say to a condition, for example, right, people with MS, right, what happens, it doesn't, please understand, conditions like MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, it doesn't cure it. What it does is it looks at the symptoms, because what's happening into the brain, right, things start communicating, it changes the communication between the brain and what's happening then at a particular site. So people with Parkinson's, you know, you hear that my tremors are slowing down. Maybe, you know, the twisting is starting to stop. People who might have mental illness, you know, it takes aggression away, all right? It calms them. If they have anxiety, things of that nature. So there are those benefits. As I said, it's not a cure, and I think that's important for people to recognize. It helps with symptoms, and that's how it helps with symptoms. So that's pretty cool, right? That's a huge positive for people who are looking for that. Yeah. Okay.
And that goes the same with cancer. I know we're seeing a lot of cancer studies coming in, but what we understand and know now, it's not a cure, but it can be a cure to some of the symptoms, and it can be a relief, especially to the chemotherapy.
Yes.
Oof.
Yeah, anything of that nature. So, yeah, please remember that component. So now I want to jump back into, you mentioned strains, and there's a lot. So we're going to look at how does somebody, like myself, we know Lyte Resources, for example, is in Toronto. Let's look at that first.
Yeah.
If I'm in Guelph and it's in Toronto, I don't want to travel in, to be honest with you. But how can we, what's the process?
Yeah, so the great thing about Lyte Resources Clinic is, although we're located in Toronto, you can come visit us at our office. There ain't much happening. There is us there and our team and our family of wonderful people that work there. But we actually work everything through the OTN, so the Ontario Telehealth app. So everything is done from the comfort of your own home.
Nice.
This also makes it super accessible for our patients who are disabled, who can't leave their home. Maybe you're not even listed as disabled, but you're just suffering from something.
Weather conditions.
Right? It could be anything. Maybe you have a dog and it's just too much to keep her, you know, at home while you drive to Toronto and then come back. So this gives you the accessibility to do from home, and the same thing with the patient educator. We will just give you a call. Excellent. So everything is super easy that way. That's what I love. You can be at work, you could be at home, you could be at your friend's house, just as long as there's a setting that's private for you and makes you feel comfortable.
Perfect. So then I would just make an appointment online, or I would call. Yeah. Make an appointment. Then in my appointment, I would then be talking to, I'm assuming, a healthcare professional, a doctor, right, who's licensed in this.
Absolutely.
Then we're going to discuss my symptoms, what I may be experiencing. And now we're going to get into strains. What does that mean? Yeah. I don't know anything about this strain stuff. What does that mean?
Absolutely. So your doctor's appointment, you may find, you can register with us online. That will get our info team out to you to schedule everything according to you. And then what I highly recommend is scheduling yourself a patient educator appointment along with your doctor appointment. Because your doctor, they're going to be about 5-10 minutes. They're going to be pretty quick with you, just going over what you need and then issuing that prescription, whereas we're there for that full conversation of the strains, and that is where it gets complicated. So quickly, I think the most important thing to talk about off the first bat is what's legal and what's not. So understanding that when legalization came into play, a lot of those fun things we were seeing in dispensaries that were illegal aren't as available anymore. So under Health Canada's guidelines, only dried cannabis and sublingual oil are legal at this point. So that means your edibles, so your yummies, nope, out of the question. You can make your own, and we'll discuss that, but there is no using of edibles, and the same applies with the topicals, which is unfortunate. But if you're purchasing topicals from a third-party resource, that is illegal. If you're making your own, which we'll discuss, totally fine.
Okay.
So what will happen is we'll go over all that on our call with your educator, and I'll just discuss with you, what are you going through? Tell me some of your symptoms. Have you used cannabis before? Did you use cannabis as a teenager? What is your experience surrounding it? What do you know? Do you have any form of relationship with Mary Jane, right?
Right.
Any form at all. So we just kind of discuss that. And then what we go into is strains and oils. So there are two options. You have your dried cannabis, which you can smoke. So you have your smoking methods. What is recommended by Health Canada is a vaporizer, and a vaporizer is basically it is like a long pen form. You fill inside of that and you take pulls off of that. So it has a button to use and guide you through that. So it's a healthier way. It's not as harmful on your lungs.
Thank you.
So it's better than using a joint or a bong or any of those other smoking methods. If that's what you prefer, that's what you prefer. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you no. But vaporizer is the way to go, or even better, using sublingual oils.
I was going to say oils, right?
So oils are becoming like the thing because not only are they, well, one, you don't have the smell of the smoke, you don't have the issue on your lungs in any form, but the oils last longer in the body. So the oils are going to last 4 to 6 hours within the body, as opposed to smoking methods, which is about 1 to 2 depending on your body. So this is, you know, for most people, really important factor is how long it's lasting within the body, right? We all work 6 to 8 hours a day, or if you're me, 15 to 16 hours a day, and you need that active relief. So oils are great for that. So the oils are also something that we can recommend, and now we always highly recommend microdosing surrounding the oils. Microdosing is important because then we can find a dose that works specific to your body and what works for you.
Okay, good.
And then there are strains. Oils is like very easy to understand. There's like CBD oil, THC oil.
We like simple.
And your combo oil, right? Your CBD and THC mix. Then there's strains, your cannabis strains. That can be very daunting for people because if you don't know, there's like over 132 licensed producers in Canada. That's a lot.
What do I do?
That's a lot.
What do I do?
How do you choose the licensed producer? And so a licensed producer is actually the ones that provide the medical marijuana. So, or recreational, depending on whether or not you're in Ontario, where you are in what province. But the licensed producers are the ones that are legally allowed to grow and legally allowed to sell their medical cannabis. And they will produce like 10 to 30 strains, depending on which licensed producer you choose.
Okay.
And that can be daunting.
Right.
Because now you have all these strains. How do I choose? So we've heard it talked about before, sativa, indica, and hybrid. Usually a way to break down your cannabis. Indica, I like to say, is like indicouch. You feel heavy.
Indicouch, I like that.
Indica, indicouch. Yeah? Easy peasy.
I love it.
Right? Sativa, I call her our sativa diva. She's someone that you can smoke and still go out.
Okay.
Don't drive. That is against the law.
Thank you.
Yep. So you can, like, you know, grab your Uber. If you're like going out and you still want to, I'm not a drinker, but I still like to go out and, you know, enjoy times out with my friends, karaoke. That's the time for Sativa Diva. Okay. She's a strain that you're gonna stay awake. You're not gonna be too sleepy.
Right.
That being said, there's also hybrids, which are a mix of both. And for some people, that's just good. It just totally depends on what you need. I still smoke an indica, even though it's an indicouch. I still smoke that during my days because for me, I just need a heavy THC.
Right.
I've also smoked for a long period of time, so it's not necessarily... I'm more used to the THC.
Right.
I'm getting used to the heaviness, right? I can actively work through that. Now, if you're going to be daytime working, I suggest a CBD strain, which they also have available now. Okay. So CBD, like we talked about before, is the non-impairing part of the plant. So the CBD strain means that you can smoke it during the day and have no impairing effects. That's really new within the cannabis world. That's
okay.
It's hard because, like, right, we used to just get off of dealers or this and that, and there wasn't a lot of availability. Even when I was a medical patient, it is changed so much since then. That's
good, though. That's good.
So now you have CBD strains, which is really important for people, like, with seizures. We've heard about what it can be doing for kids and for adults. And now that being said, I know I spoke on being 15 when I was using. You should always discuss with your medical doctor and your parents.
Yes.
If you're under the age, there might be a time and a place for cannabis, but it's very specific to like family inclusiveness surrounding that, because it is important that we're not damaging the brain. We're not doing anything. It can be complicated. We still don't know, and it's kind of unethical to test on kids and to figure that out.
Right.
You know, so
brain development, folks, you got to be careful.
I mean, I work very hard on my brain development because I know that I've been an avid smoker my whole life.
Yeah.
And I had a nurse and a mom supporting me and knowing what I was going through. So if you're someone who is underage of the limit, the legal limit, just make sure you're having that conversation. It's better to have an open conversation. And Lyte Resources is a clinic that will cover kids and teenagers who are under that age, as long as you have a parent guardian.
Okay, that's good. And so with Lyte Resources, it sounds like they have really 4 main pillars. They have one, obviously it's convenient, it's simple, it's accessible, things of that nature. They have educational components, which we like.
Very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have their highly educated doctors,
yes,
right, and the privacy. Obviously, privacy is pretty important. And when I went online, and they do have highly encrypted systems, so you know that your personal information is safe. Okay, so that I think for a lot of people is very, very important. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've talked about obviously different ways, things of that nature, and I really appreciate you putting out there to the young people. Okay, because that's important too. It's not just, ooh, let's go get, high, whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So take this in caution, because I think that's important. And we also know moving forward, and I know historically, stigma around the topic. Okay, and it's something that I think we all need to become educated on, help ourselves out. So can you talk maybe a little more, maybe about another minute or two or so like that, just on how can we maybe reduce stigma?
Yeah. I think the stigma surrounding cannabis is, well, it's still there, whether or not legalization has come into play. I am very lucky to be a woman of color speaking on cannabis on a podcast. That would never have happened 10 years ago.
That's right, yeah.
I would be incarcerated for doing something like that. So we have come somewhere within this stigma, but there's still a long way to go. And what I say when I surround or talk to people who are really just feeling a little negative about cannabis is at one point, cannabis was legal. In 1925, this was still a legal product. It was still being sold on our shelves. Someone decided that it was going to be
Prohibition
a big
not
deal.
only happened with alcohol,
but it happened with cannabis, right? Like this is actually a legalization technically. We've been there before. George Washington grew hemp. There's a lot of, I think, unfortunately, crime and racial stigma that got attached to the plant as well. And that created something so extreme. It's just a plant, y'all. It's not. It's really not much different than a lavender plant or a peppermint plant. It produces essential oils.
Yes.
So for me, it's just like, I try to tell people it's actually not that big of a deal. Although it's making a lot of money for people, and it's this huge thing right now, and it's also healing a lot of people. For some people, it's not working at all, which is totally fine. It's just not that big of a deal. It's just a plant, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's just a plant that is literally grown in nature with or without us. Whether or not the people are here, it's going to happen.
And I really appreciate the fact, that comparison in terms of essential oils, because it is. Yeah. And if you look throughout time, right, and all cultures, plants have always been used. Okay, so something to think about. Okay, I'm just saying. So when you see that, just try to get educated. Think what's happening on the other side, because you don't know behind the curtain of an individual. Okay, I just want to say that as well. Yeah. So
the education is just so key. Like if you're feeling like negative towards it, or you're feeling confused about it, or you're feeling positive but you just don't know where to go, ask a question. You can always find me on Facebook. I'm sure Jay will link me in the bottom, and I'm always open to any messages or anything like that, because for me, like, that's key. My mom was not on the green board either as a nurse. She's a very, Health Canada regulation, all of that. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of conversations. But staying open to those conversations, I think, is what's going to make that key.
Right? Hashtag being open. Hashtag being open. Okay, that's what we're going to have to use. So we would love to hear from you, community out there. If you have a story yourself, please, just write it down. If you have questions, right, in terms of anything else that you want to know about, we can certainly get you the information, or at least direct you to where we know you'll get the information, okay? Everything will be posted. I will have it in there, right? LyteResources.com, okay? And I'm also going to do Queen's, her link as well, okay? So you can stay connected. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so.
Oh, you know what we forgot to do? You have 1 minute. I hate to tell you this, 1 minute, homemade, if people were interested.
Oh, yes.
I can also put in the recipe later if we don't have time.
Yes, we'll put in a recipe later, but you can make your own personal edibles with your shake product from your cannabis, and you can make your own topicals with your oils.
Perfect.
So you can make your own outer, so like instead of an icy huddle of Terran or any of those, you can make that. So we'll put the recipe below for you.
I like that.
And
we'll put the recipe in.
then you guys have something that you can make.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody out there. Okay. Remember, please like, share, tag somebody that you care and love about. I think this is important that we get information out from, just to know what's out there. Get yourself educated. So thank you very much. Okay, folks. Have a great day. And thank you too. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks
so much.
Take care, folks. Cheers.
Bye.